Okay, the topic of this video, and probably part of the next one also, is the most famous cornerstone of Ashkenazic Jewry, one of the most early Jews to live in Ashkenaz, although he is not the father of Ashkenazic Jewry, and that is Rashi, Rav Shlomo Yitzchaki. And Rashi accomplished in his lifetime probably what nobody else had done up until that point, and probably almost what nobody else was able to do after. And there's an idea, there's possible, like there's a tradition that Rashi descends from the family of David HaMelech, meaning he comes from royalty. And Rashi was born in the year 1040 in the city of Troyes in France. If you remember, we discussed the three main regions in the world of Ashkenaz where Jews lived. Troyes was basically 25 miles north, about, I don't know, it's about 50 kilometers north of Paris. And it was a city where there were a lot of vineyards, a lot of grapes were grown, and a lot of wine was made, which makes sense because Rashi, by profession, was not a Torah commentator. He was not a rabbi. He was what was called a vintner. What that means is that he was involved in the growing of grapes and the manufacture and the sale of wine. He grew grapes and he made wine out of it. And Rashi was incredibly successful. He was very, very knowledgeable in all of these areas. And if you even take a look in his Torah commentary, in his Gemara commentary, he doesn't only know Torah, he doesn't only know Chumash, he doesn't only know Gemara. He knows so many different areas, such as agriculture, toolmaking, commercial law, transactions, commercial laws like business law. These are all areas that obviously he had to know in order to be able to be a successful businessman in the sale of wine. And he was just fat, and not only that, he was just very interested. He was obviously immensely knowledgeable. He was intellectually curious, and he knew math. He knew science. Right? You have to understand science in order to really understand how wine is made. Right? When it turns to alcohol, how long it needs to ferment for. How long is too long? How long is too short? What you have to do to the grapes, the science behind everything. And Rashi really was able to perfect all of this. When Rashi was born in the year 1040, Rashi's dates are 1040 to 1105. You should know those dates. When Rashi was born, there were probably only about between 5,000 and 10,000 Ashkenazic Jews in the world. Some of them lived in France. Some of them lived in other areas. Actually, there were some in France again and some in Germany. Most Jews were living in other places like Spain, Northern Africa. Ashkenazic Jewry, when Rashi was born, was actually very, very small. And when Rashi died, there was probably close to 50,000 Jews, if not more, living in France. People would move there just because of him. He single-handedly built up the Ashkenazic Jewish community. He undoubtedly, if you look down here, he set the foundation for all the future of Ashkenazic Jewry. Rashi set the tone, right? People often confuse the father of Ashkenazic Jewry. It is Rabbeinu Gershom, as we discussed in the last video. People often confuse it with Rashi, but because he was the foundation, he was the rock, and he single-handedly built what became known as the Ashkenazic Jewish community. He built that foundation. If you look at the next page, there's a lot of legends, there's a lot of stories that are told about Rashi. I'm sure some of you have heard of them, maybe in different versions with a little bit of a different detail. We're going to go through each legend, we're going to talk about each story, and we will then at the end try and understand, right, a legend is something we don't know if it's 100% true, but it's probably something that we can learn from. The first legend, the first story has to do with Rashi's mother. The story is told that while Rashi's mother was pregnant with him, with Shlomo Yitzchaki, she went to the city of Worms. And one day she was walking down a very, very narrow alleyway, right? Imagine like a really, really narrow, or really, really not so wide hallway. And a whole bunch of French knights, a bunch of French Christians, I guess they look like this down here on the bottom, riding on horses, were coming toward her. And it was going to be impossible, especially she was pregnant. It was going to be impossible for her to get out of the way, and she was surely about to die. This Frenchman, there was a Frenchman that was about to run over her when she basically leaned her back up against the wall, and inexplicably, miraculously, an opening opened up in the wall, and she was saved. That's the first story, right? Rashi's mother, she's about to get trampled by a Christian on a horse. She leans her back against the wall, and the wall miraculously opens up for her. She moves back, and the wall opens up. That's legend number one. Legend number two, you can see here the picture of the stones. It helps us understand the question. The question is what merit did the parents of Rashi have to give birth to such a child? Meaning, Rashi's parents must have been incredibly special people. What was the secret? What was the secret of Rashi's parents that they were able to give birth to such an incredible individual? So the story is told that Rashi's father was a dealer in precious stones, right? He dealt with a lot of very expensive gems. And that was a pretty unusual profession for a Jew at the time. If you remember, most Jews were really in money. Some of them were merchants, so that was him, but most of them were either in money lending or finance in some way. But he was a very well-known dealer in precious stones. And Rashi's father at the time had in his possession a particular stone that was very well-known in the city of Troyes. Everybody knew that he had it. And one day there was a guy from the church, a Christian from the church, told Rashi's father that he wanted to purchase the stone, and he wanted to put the stone on the crown of a crucifix that would be used in the church services. If anybody remembers, the crucifix is the picture of Jesus, like kind of hanging there on a cross. And in some, I guess, pictures, in some renderings of it, he's wearing a crown. And he wants to put the stone on the crown, and basically it would be used during services, meaning it would be as if that Christians were, in essence, davening to the crucifix, to the statue of Jesus with the stone on his crown. Rashi's father, even though it was very well known that he had the stone, he basically denied it. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have such a stone. And they came to his house to search for it. They couldn't find it. And they actually searched through his house. And the reason that they couldn't find it is because he really didn't have it. He threw it away in the river, meaning he took a stone that could have earned him tons and tons of money. He made such an incredible monetary sacrifice, even though it probably would have been halakhically okay to sell them the stone, even knowing it was going to go into the crown of a picture of Jesus. He felt like sometimes there's, going according to the letter of the law, exactly what you're supposed to do, and there's people that like to go beyond. And perhaps in order for us to get an understanding of what Rashi's parents did in order to merit having a child is because they went beyond what you were supposed to do. And Rashi's father, again, he threw away a tremendous amount of money just so that these Christians could not have the stone. That's story number two. Story number three, legend number three, has to do with a really obnoxious Christian individual by the name of Godfrey of Bouillon, or Godfrey de Bouillon. He was one of the leaders, if you see his picture over here, of the Crusades. The Crusades were basically a bunch of religious wars that the Christians initiated against the Muslims that had nothing to do with Jews. And the purpose of these wars, the Crusades, there were a number of them. The purpose of these Crusades was so that they would capture at that time the Holy Land, or Israel, and Yerushalayim were controlled by the Muslims, and it's a holy city for Christians as well, right? It's a holy city for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. They wanted to conquer it from the Muslims, and they wanted a whole series of wars called the Crusades, and they tried to conquer it back from them. Overall, the Crusades were a failure, except for the first one. They were actually pretty successful. But Godfrey de Bouillon, who was a pretty obnoxious individual, on his way from France to the Holy Land, to Israel, he decided to stop in Troyes because he wanted to ask Rashi if he would be successful. And he comes and he says, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo, am I going to be successful? And Rashi says to him that yes, you are going to be successful. You are going to capture Yerushalayim from the Muslims, but it's going to be at a tremendous cost. And you're not going to last forever there. And when you come back to Troyes, you're only going to come in with 3 horses, meaning it's going to come at such a cost to you. You're going to win, but it's going to be so costly that you're only going to return back with 3 horses. And Godfrey de Bouillon, in his obnoxious tone, says to Rashi, if I even come back with 4, I'm going to personally kill you and destroy the Jewish community in Troyes. It goes without saying, and it shouldn't be such a surprise, that the crusade goes exactly as Rashi predicted. The Christians do win. It is at a tremendous cost. And even when he was on his way back, Godfrey de Bouillon, he didn't have a lot left, but he wanted to even make sure, just to one-up Rashi, just to be able to get him, so to speak, he wanted to make sure that he returned with at least 4 horses. And he came back with a minimum of 4 horses. And it was an incredible miracle that just as the 4th horse was about to enter the arch that would take him into the city of Troyes, There was something that collapsed on the arch, like it kind of fell, and one of the horses was killed. The arch, right? It fell and it collapsed on one of the horses, and one of the horses was killed. And Godfrey de Bouillon, in fact, only entered into the city of Troyes with 3 horses, and that's the story. That's the third legend about Rashi. Now, we don't know what's true. We don't know if it's true. We don't know if it's not true. Obviously, these stories seem probably for some of you like a little bit supernatural. One second. Okay, I'm almost done, but I'm almost done. Okay, these stories seem a little bit supernatural, but the point of them is they paint Rashi as the supernatural miracle worker. And I think the major point here that nobody is saying these legends about me. Nobody is saying these legends about you, or at least maybe they will. God willing, one day they'll say these legends about you. That these legends are only made up about great people, and the legends about Rashi are rooted in the genuine admiration that people had for him and people had for his accomplishments. Meaning he was so incredible that people almost went so far as, I don't want to say make up the story, but they saw him in such a supernatural light just because they were so impressed with him. And again, only people like Rashi, people were making these legends up about. We'll continue the lesson about Rashi in the next slide, in the next video.